You're watching Good on Paper, a bookish channel. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome back. Today we have a special guest that we're really excited to chat with today. We have author Austen Ryan with us.
Hi.
Yeah, it's so good to see you, Austen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Oh, good. Yeah, we always look forward to getting to know other authors better. So, yeah, we've been excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Austen is the author of Sweet and Magical Fantasy. She is also a freelance editor, and she is very proud of her Norwegian heritage and even has the whole. This was something I was excited about. So, hopefully, everybody else is interested in this too. But anyway, I was excited to see that Austen has like a whole traditional Norwegian dress, and I just thought that was really cool. Um, so, does your heritage inspire a lot of what you write?
It does. So the first book that I wrote was the Christmas Marriage Plot. That one was that was the first one that I wrote with the Norwegian heritage, and I sort of didn't really want to. Oh, well, this is probably gonna be because I heard some advice from someone saying that you should focus on what sets you apart from other people. And I was like, well, this probably sets me apart. So I wrote that one a little reluctantly. And then I wrote two books that had nothing to do with my Norwegian heritage. And then my last one now is also inspired by Norwegian folklore. So a little bit different because the first one was a contemporary.
Oh, wow. So you've written in several different genres.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that is the best thing to do when you're starting as an author, but yeah, that's what I've done. So
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's becoming more and more common with indie authors. Because I know in the past with traditional publishing, you had to get a pen name if you're going to switch genres. But I read an article, it wasn't that recently, but I read an article that said that because of indie publishing, authors are sort of just building themselves as the authors, the platform, and then they write within different genres because people like them, and they know them as an author and their books. So, I don't know, like the world I feel like is changing. So that might not be like a no-no anymore.
yeah,
Writing
I
different
do
genres.
think, and I do know that I've read authors that I really liked, and then I followed them into another genre, and then I started reading that genre. So it does, that
Mhm.
can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was really curious about your editing business. How long have you had it open? What do you like about it? Just tell us about it.
Yeah, so my editing business is Ryan Edits LLC. I started it officially in 2020 when everyone was starting businesses. What else were we supposed to do? But I have been editing for a little longer than that. So I think I started doing my first like paid work in 2017. So yeah, I do developmental and line editing and proofreading. I started off not doing developmental editing because I didn't really know a lot about it, but now I do all three. And I really, really love it. Editing is definitely my thing. I would say I don't even know that I could choose between it and writing, but I might actually choose the editing.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Editing is very, very much that's my main thing that I like about writing as well is the editing, which I know a lot of people don't like it, but I really love
Interesting.
it. And line editing especially, I really love. And then I just have a knack for finding typos, so proofreading was just sort of a natural. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that must
Hmm.
be so fun because you get to work with authors and just, I don't know, help them bring their vision to life. So I bet
Yeah,
that is like just so rewarding.
I love that part, and I don't not work with traditionally published authors, but I do work with have a special heart for indies because I write indie and I know a lot of really great indie authors that, they might just need a little help in the right direction, and then their stories are really good, but they're, maybe they have a lot of typos that would, pull people out of the story, or maybe they just need to like remove a subplot or something like that. And it can be like these really tiny fixes, and then their book is even better and even truer to itself. And so, yeah, I do love that I can do that. And I try to keep my prices low to make it affordable, because everyone knows that indie publishing is super expensive. And yeah, I really like it. I really love it. And I've had a lot of really good clients. Thankfully, I have not had any bad clients, and that's a little scary. Like, when are they gonna show up? But they haven't shown up, so hopefully they just stay away. I've had really, really great clients. And I've gotten to read some really incredible books that I wouldn't have gotten to read otherwise. Probably just because I wouldn't have thought, maybe I wouldn't have seen them because they're smaller authors. Maybe I just wouldn't have thought, oh, maybe this isn't my thing. And then I read it and I was like, this is absolutely my thing. Like, I'm going to read all of this now.
Yeah.
And if they have other books out, I'll read those. Like, I've found new favorite authors by being an editor, which is pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, what would your advice be to somebody who had either wants to start learning how to edit, or maybe they've been editing a while and they want to start an editing business? Do you have any advice you would give someone who is thinking about maybe dipping their toes into editing?
I would, I think I would probably wait for it to pay for itself before I actually went and started the business. I have waited a bit with that because there's a lot of expenses that come with the business, and you kind of have to feel those upfront. So that's one thing that I would wait with. The other thing, I think I would spend some time just learning the craft, obviously, but more so learning how not to erase the author's voice from the story, because that's something I see a lot with people. Like, they are writers themselves and they go in and edit other people's stories, and then they kind of, rephrase the sentences into something they would have written, or they try to make the story something it's not. Like, I'm a huge romance fan. I edit uh, lots of genres. Most of the stuff that I am currently editing is romance. But I also, if I read a book that's not particularly romantic, I come up with my own romantic subplot in my head and in my mind. These characters that are probably like a really tiny piece of the plot are in my mind. They're like the greatest love story of all time. But as an editor, I don't go in and I don't try to like up the romance. I don't try to make it a different book than what it is. I try to pull on the strengths of the actual author and make sure that I stay true to their voice, instead of, I'll read a sentence and I'll be like, I would have never written it like that, but I don't change that. As long as it's a good sentence, implements the meaning, I wouldn't change it. So that's something that I see a lot with even very experienced editors, where they're like, oh yeah, this author did that, and it was really weird, because I'm in editing groups on Facebook because I'm an editor. And I see a lot of people say things like that, or even like they have a specific grammar thing that they like. And what a lot of people don't know is that the dictionaries are not the same. They don't necessarily spell words the same. They have variations. Several things can be correct grammar at once. And as an editor, you would work with a style sheet that you make for the client. And so you could be like, this client always uses this lesser used version of this word. Or, if they wrote British English or Canadian English or something like that, you would mark that. Whereas some people are like, oh no, this word is always spelled like this, and it isn't. So I think that's what I would advise, to look into that, just because I think it's very easy to discourage authors as an editor because you have a lot of power. You have a lot of power, and you're kind of coming in there with your red pen. I don't actually edit with a red pen, but your red pen and all your editing knowledge, and these authors are just like, oh my gosh, maybe I should never write again, which happened to me with the first editor that I paid. And she did it wasn't a bad edit, it was a really good edit, but I felt extremely chastised, and I actually decided to not write anymore. And then I cried myself to sleep, and I woke up the next day and I was like, you know what, I can't not write. So I just kept writing.
Yeah.
And that book is The Fairchild Library. It's a good book. It's fine. It could be written, it didn't need to be scrapped. Yeah, so that's something maybe I would advise, learning the craft, and also being aware that people have different styles and different voices, and to not obviously correct things that are wrong or suggest things. You can always suggest everything, but don't suggest it just because you would write it like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good advice. Like, I mean, I definitely know because I've worked with editors before, and before I choose one, I always do get a sample edit, and definitely tone, like kind of the tone of voice they use when they're suggesting things is something I really take into mind because, I want like a certain way, and encouraging and helpful. And not that, they're saying all good things. They might be having, corrections or other ideas I could use, but the tone is so important, when you're talking to, I mean, to me as a writer, I don't know what it is like an editor. It's just so important that you don't come across of this is bad, that's bad, everything's bad. I don't know. Some people might get more inspired by that. I'm sure that style might work better with other people. But for me as a writer, I am very particular about the tone an editor uses with me,
Yeah, and I do think that also, the editing relationship is very personal. I've become friends with my editors, and I have become friends with clients because you spend a lot of time, writing is very personal. And so you're sending someone your heart basically, and then they're just like red penning it. And then if they do it the next way, you get to know each other really well. And I always do sample edits for new clients, just because first of all, I want to make sure that their book is actually ready for editing, because I don't want to end up with a 100,000 word book that is in like the drafting stage where it really is ready to edit. Because first of all, that is a lot of work, but also it's a lot of wasted money for the client, and I don't really want to do that. And also I want to make sure that what I have to offer is what they actually want, because people use, different words to describe editing, like copy editing or proofreading or line editing or developmental editing or substantive editing, or big picture editing. They use all of these words, and they don't all mean the same to all people. And so that's another thing where some people are asking for a copy edit, they mean a proofread, or some people will be asking for a copy edit and they mean a line edit, what I would refer to as a line edit. And so when I do a sample edit, I kind of do like all three into one, and just 1,000 words. And then if they like that, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. If you don't want me to do this to your entire book, please don't hire me. And generally they do hire me, not always, because again, you need to find someone who works for you and who is giving the kind of feedback that you want and the kind of feedback that you're inspired by. You don't want someone who's going to be extremely negative, unless that is something that you enjoy. I do not enjoy that. Or you want someone who understands your book and your characters. Like, I had one editor who was editing one of my stories, and the hero is kind of like a little bit of a villain at the beginning, like a little morally gray, and I think she just didn't like him. And I was like, I don't know how well this is going to work if you don't like my main character, because like, you don't have to have a likable, but you do have to have a compelling character. But this was a romance, so this was the hero in the romance. And so I was like sending it all over, and I was like, is this person really as terrible? Like, do you feel like this is like, is this a major turnoff for you? And everyone's like, no, it's fine. I want to read more. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll just keep him that way. So yeah, you do need to find someone who gets your story and gets your book and gets you. So it's a very personal relationship, which is why if it doesn't work out, then there's nothing wrong with either of you. It's just like everything else. You want someone who can offer what you want and that you also like.
Yeah, I think as an indie author, because your options for editing are limited, because your price ranges are so much smaller, it can be really intimidating to pick an editor because you don't know, are we going to work well together? Are they, like you said, are they going to try and change my voice? Are they going to understand my characters? So, I mean, it's nice to know that there are editors who really focus a lot on trying to do that well, because it is scary to try and, like you said, give your heart to someone and be like, okay, rip it up and tell me what you think.
Yeah. And there are really good editors out there. And I also think there's always scam artists because there's money in editing. There's actually really good money in editing if you edit for trad houses as a freelancer. There's very good money in editing. And I do think that it's also sometimes something people jump on and they're like, oh, well, it's just reading. I can read and give my opinion. And it's like, it's not, it's a little more nuanced than that. It's not just that. It's also some people have really great story instinct. I did not have really story instincts when I started editing. I have very good word instincts. So like the flow of the words and the sentences, the prose, that is very much my strong point, and that's where I started. But I learned the other things because you can learn them. It's just that some people are gonna naturally just know that, oh no, this arc is like falling in the middle, or like this is too soon for the dark moment, and some people are gonna know that very instinctively. I'm not one of those. I had to read a lot and learn a lot and practice a lot, and I do it now, for work, and I believe that I'm decently good at it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be charging money for it. That was something I had to learn. But then there are other people who know it naturally, and then again, there are some people who are just like, oh well, I can get paid to read books. I'm gonna do that, and then they don't necessarily recognize your giant plot hole or your repetitiveness or whatever it is that we all have things. Mine is repetitiveness. I tend to be a very repetitive writer, and I also tend to write very short, so I'm an underwriter. But then other people are gonna have other, some people are overwriters, and people struggle to get into the heads of characters. So you kind of just want someone who can work with you in the way that you need. Like if you sent a sample edit to someone and they pinpointed all the grammatical errors, but they didn't notice that your main character changed from like a dark and brooding person in the beginning and then they're like a golden retriever by the end of the 1,000 words, you want someone who will point that out. So
yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about, you can get better at something. Like it's good to know your strengths and your weaknesses because you can get better at it. Because I'm the same as you. I am a very big prose person. The flow of language is always so easy to me, but I was not good at, developmental thing. And I didn't realize that until I started meeting with a writers group back in 2018, 2019. And we'd read samples of people's work and everybody would go around the table and people would say, yeah, well, the character just and the arc, and they'd have all these things to say and I would have nothing. I would just be like, oh, I liked it. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
And I joined Instagram. I read Save the Cat. I read writing craft books. I worked with another critique group. I started beta reading, and by reading and working on my own writing, and then also working with, betas and critique groups and all of that, and just being on Instagram, people have a lot of helpful tips. I got a lot better at developmental editing, or developmental thinking, I guess, because I didn't start editing or anything. To the point where I think it was last year, I was beta reading, and I felt like, you know what? I think I'm like starting to get this. And I had one of the people I beta read saying it was the best, critique she'd ever gotten. Like, and she had went to school for writing and all this, so she had gotten a lot. And I was really proud of myself, because I thought, I remember there's a time where I could not do this at all. And so I think you brought up such a good point is, if you're not good at something, you can learn it. And I think that's super inspiring to hear, because you're doing it, you're getting paid to do it now. And so that's so cool that you just brought up your skills.
And you absolutely can. There's so many. I mostly do books. There are definitely courses, there are classes. There's actually one of the best ways to learn editing is to get a professional edit. I had a really good developmental editor that I still use, and she actually taught me a lot of the developmental stuff just by editing my stuff. So now I see it and I'm like, oh, Savannah would pinpoint that. Sorry, I have this in a pen holder. So I would be like, oh, Savannah would say that this was too fast, or like something like that. And so that's actually one of the advices that I got early on, was to get a professional edit, because you do it's very much like a personal writing class. So in a writing class, you learn lots of different things, but in an edit, you get all the advice, but only on the specific things you need. So I really think, even if you can only get, like a part of your book edited, or even like, I mean, we don't really recommend using sample edits for that, because they're for, for clients that you want, therefore establishing a client editor relationship. But even if you can just get like a small part edited, like I do, that's actually why I do the mini edits. I offer mini edits, and they're $25 for the first 2,500 words. Is that right? Yeah, I always say it wrong. I always say 25,000 words, which is a lot more, and it's not what I'm offering. A lot more. But yeah, for the first 2,500 words, because even though that's only those words, it's going to probably, a lot of your issues are going to show up, because that's about 10 pages, right? So you're probably going to end up showing a lot of your issues, and then you can take the feedback from those pages and work on the rest of the book. And I actually, the reason I did it was because I had a similar 10-page edit early on, and I took the feedback and I wrote it down in a list, and then I went through the entire book to see if I saw any similar issues, and that made the book a lot better. So yeah, I would recommend that, like, if you can, or people, if you have good beta readers, that's also a way to get feedback. I'm not always a big fan of critique groups, just because I do find that there's maybe I've just had really bad experiences, but I do feel like there's very uneducated advice where people are like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that and you shouldn't be doing this, and then in reality it's just that they wouldn't personally be doing it that way, or it's like a style of writing they don't like, or even like first, some people absolutely despise first person. I can respect that, because I used to also absolutely despise first person. I write all my books in first person now. Just, because things change, and yeah, like, even if someone hears something and they're like, oh, well, I really don't like it, but then it's just because it was like a tense they didn't like, or stuff like that. So I guess I'm very selective about whose advice I take when it comes to writing. And I've gotten really good feedback from beta readers before, so it's not like you can't get it. And I've gotten good feedback from my critique group before, so that's possible. But I also think, if someone is telling you to change the entire plot and kill off that one character, maybe like look at their credentials. Like, do they have any sort of idea what they're talking about, or do they just like to kill off characters? Is it?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
I mean, what genre do they write? I mean, if they write something completely different than you, maybe they write thrillers and you write romance. Are they trying to give you advice like your book is a thriller? So it's just things to keep in mind and just kind of filter the advice you get. Because I agree with you. I've had, experiences in critique groups that weren't good. I'm not in any right now. I like to work with beta readers. And before that, I like to have like an alpha reader, critique partner or two, but like people I'm really close to who write very similarly to me. Because I feel like, if I'm sharing like first draft stuff, I want it to just be that close personal relationship, like more like you would have with an editor. Like I want it to be somebody who's like really similar and has the same kind of story like vibes that I do. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's smart.
Yeah, so we actually had a lot of questions from listeners for you, Austin. But before we jump into those, Rachel, did you have any questions for Austin? I know we talked a lot about editing. We talked a little about your books. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Not about because I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about the editing, which honestly, there's so much I didn't know about it. So I have a lot more respect for it now because I didn't realize how much knowledge went into that. So I'm like very impressed hearing about it. I'm like, okay, this is serious stuff. The only question that popped up in my head earlier in the chat was, since you've written so many different genres and like subgenres, I'm just curious which one you've enjoyed the most. So you've kind of had that experience of writing in multiple ones.
I actually really I used to be a very strict not fantasy reader. Fantasy is the genre that I enjoy the most when I write.
Okay.
So
That's so funny.
Yeah, fantasy romance. But yeah, I didn't actually read fantasy really at all until a couple of years ago. Like my sister and I would talk about books, and I would read all the romance, contemporary romance, and she would read all the fantasy. And I was just like, I don't like fantasy books at all. And then I heard someone suggest to try to write in different genres just to see what you like. So I was like, I guess I can figure out how to write a fantasy romance because it has to be romance. And then I enjoyed it. And that's why 3 out of 4 of my books are fantasy, or I guess Pirate's Treasure. I don't know if that would qualify as maybe like it's time travel. Is that fantasy? I don't think it's quite fantasy, but it's definitely not contemporary either.
I think
I feel like it's a
it's
subgenre of fantasy.
Yeah, subgenre, and it can also fall into historical fiction subgenre too.
Right.
If it's time travel, because you're going back to a different time, so it's probably a subgenre. I think with both fantasy and historical fiction, I would say, or historical fantasy. That's another.
Right, because the Fairchild Library is historical fantasy. It's basically like completely Victorian.
Yes.
So it's completely Victorian, but then there is magic. So I did spend a lot of time researching things, and I couldn't put towels in there because the terracloth towels didn't come out till 1848. And this book was... Maybe I do have towels in there because I don't know what time my book is set in. Oh, 48, yes. Okay. They were like brand new, so like they couldn't be in there.
That's a fun fact.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and also sugar cubes. I was really sad about that. I wanted to put sugar cubes in and I couldn't. I mean, I have a magical cat, so I probably could have if I wanted to, but I didn't because I wanted it to be super authentic.
Yeah.
So,
So the Fairchild Library is the one that I read, and that's your Victorian fantasy. It's about a talking cat. That one is super cute. But you've also written, so your first book was that, what was the title of your first book again? That was the contemporary romance.
It's The Christmas Marriage Plot. This is probably
Okay.
backwards. I don't know if you
It
turn.
looks good to me, but we'll put all the different, we'll put the titles of your books down. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to talk about them a little bit before we jumped into the questions because they're kind of talking about the book. So I thought we should give listeners like, you know, a little overview of your books because you have four. So the Fairchild Library, and then so your first one, which is contemporary romance, is The Christmas Marriage Plot.
That's a really short
And
one. It's like basically
okay.
a novelette, I think. It's
Oh,
very
fun. Yeah, that sounds really fun. I think I actually have that one. So I've got a whole like kind of list of books I'm going to read this Christmas. So I've got Rachel's Christmas novella. I think I've got yours. I've got a whole bunch. So I'm kind of getting excited for Christmas now. So I've got all these books to read. But so then, so you have, let's see. And then what are the other two books you publish? You have the time travel one.
Yeah, that's Pirate's Treasure. That's the time travel one. And then I have The Fairchild Library was the third. And then A Winter Proposal came out this summer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that one has the Norwegian folklore.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So A Winter Proposal and Pirate's Treasure. Those are the ones I also have not read yet. So I'm excited. So we'll put all these down below for listeners in case they want to check out any of your books. But I figured now is a good time to dive into the listener questions.
Right.
So let's see, what's a good one? Let's go with, okay, so Genevieve wants to know, where do you get the inspiration for your books?
It's very random. A Winter Proposal, I got the inspiration from because my friend I went to visit my friend and she had a cat, Max, would spend all his days outside and then he would come into the house at night and he would throw up. And this was obviously great because you don't want anyone to come into your house at night to throw up. But then I said that maybe he was actually, because I had just read First Kiss by Jenny Hickman. So I was like, what if he's a fairy prince? And he just like is off ruling in fairy during the day and then he just comes home at night to like look after you. But then it's really hard for him to be in the cat body at night. So he throws up because it's just so exhausting. So that is literally the plot of my book.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's why it has a cat. So yeah, so that was the inspiration for that. And then Pirate's Treasure was actually it's based on a library because I spent for a while I had like some scheduling issues. So I ended up in a library in a town like 30 minutes away from my house. And I just had to hang out there during the day. And so I spent a lot of time in this library and you know, I just kind of hung out in the library. And then there was a pirate festival nearby. And so people dressed up as pirates and stuff. And there was this really handsome, very much older than me pirate who walked past me on the street. And he had like a great costume. He could have been in a movie. Like he literally just looked like he walked off of the set of Pirates of the Caribbean or something. And he winked at me. He was walking with his wife. So but yeah, he looked at me and I was like, oh my gosh, what if there was this? And also I had a friend who worked as a librarian at the time. And so we would talk about all the random people that would come into the library during the day. And so I was like, what if this librarian was at this particular library where I spend all my time? And then this really strange guy comes in, but he's a pirate and he's from like 1725. And so it changed a bit. So like the pirate actually just shows up in the basement. A lot of seawater and it's a little mystical how he got in there. And yeah, so that's that story.
Oh my
Oh yeah,
goodness.
and because she's a librarian and he doesn't know how to read because he's a pirate in 17. So of course he doesn't know how to read. And he's like, a book brought me here. I have to find a book. So he's trying to learn to read so that he could figure out how to find his book. And she's like, I guess I could teach this incredibly handsome pirate captain how to read. I guess, because I have extra time. So that is that story.
Oh my gosh, your inspiration is so like I'm just blown away by like all these like how your brain works when these random things happen. And also these are great book pitches. Like I'm like I need to read this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Fairchild Library was just I think I might have shared that on my Instagram. It's someone wrote one of those like meme things where it's like, wouldn't it be cool if someone wrote a story about a cat who had like to marry the woman you had to find the cat, but then the cat couldn't really be found, and then it turns out in that one it was that the woman turned into be the cat. But I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I should try to write that. So that was a really terrible depiction of that meme, but it was like a Tumblr post, I think.
Yes.
And it's
yes.
actually,
I remember that.
I think The White Cat by Neil Gaiman is written along the same idea. I haven't read his books. I have no idea if it follows that at all, but someone said that in the comment section. They were like, there is actually a book out like this. But yeah, it was about how there was this spinster in this town and someone wanted to marry her, but they couldn't marry her unless they caught the cat. And so the cat was really difficult to find. And so one person figured out that they could, make the cat like them and come to them. And then it turns out that the woman was the cat. So she was basically just like filtering out the suitors she didn't want, which was pretty cool. And that's not quite what the Fairchild Library is. It's more, I just kind of took the cat idea and the woman and just ran with it. So it's about the master of the library. He dies and leaves his only daughter, who is a woman, so obviously she cannot inherit the title. So he leaves her, and she can marry whoever finds the Fairchild cat that has been released at some point. And so the whole town is looking for this cat, and then Frederick Holloway is like a poor dock worker, and he has two sisters he's trying to provide for, and so he's like, I need to find this cat, because with the library comes a lot of wealth and a lot of knowledge and power and stuff. And so he's like, I need to find this cat, and what is the better way to find that but to go straight to the source? So he climbs up this lady's wall to her window to hopefully entice her to, tell him where the cat is, and she is not very impressed with that, as you probably would be if some stranger just like climbed up the wall to your window and then was just like, hey, can you tell me how to marry you? Because that's not creepy at all. But yeah, so that's that story. And I don't remember why I wrote the Christmas marriage plot. I think I just like was trying to write something Norwegian.
Oh,
So that's boring. But yeah, so, just a series of random things.
oh. Well, I don't know. I feel like the Christmas marriage plot, like the title kind of says it all. I mean, why wouldn't you want to write about that or read about that?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shauna wanted to know, what is one emotion you always hope to give to your readers? I don't know if that looks different depending on the genre you write, or if it's like the same no matter what genre you write, but
Yeah, so I thought a bit about this, and I think it's hope, because I do write a bit about darker things. There's like the Pirate's Treasure has a lot of themes about abandonment, because this main character has been left a lot, and then she's time traveling and she's being sort of, there's a threat of her being left alone again in a different time and stuff. And A Winter Proposal has some pretty dark themes too. So I think, I'm always trying to convey that there's hope, and yeah, I think that's it.
I love that. Hope is such a good theme.
Yeah, and I didn't really set out to write it that way, but I do think that if you read my books that hopefully you would feel more hopeful about things than before you read them.
Yeah. There is another good question while we're talking about your books, is Genevieve also wanted to know how you blend your heritage in your books. So I know you wrote two that were kind of very inspired, and maybe that looks different from the contemporary to the fantasy. Like, what was that process like for those books?
So I think with the Christmas marriage plot, I was trying to write a Christmas novella because the things that I liked about Norwegian heritage in Norway at the time was really the Christmas related things. So I was kind of trying to put everything that I loved about Christmas into this book. And with A Winter Proposal, I actually did the same thing because that was originally supposed to be a Christmas novella. Because I went to visit my friend with a cat on Labor Day weekend, and I was like, hey, I could totally write a Christmas novella by Christmas with this cat fairy theme. And I absolutely could not do that. Tried. and it just kept getting longer and longer, and I almost scrapped it at one point because I was like, I don't think this is sticking together. And then as I was writing, I was like, you know what? I kind of think I want to add in, like the Norwegian folklore, which I didn't touch on in the other book at all. But I was like, I want to add in the folklore, and we don't really have fairies as, like they wouldn't be what you would think of as, excuse me, as the, typical fantasy fairies. We actually have like really short, ugly fairies in folklore. Yeah, so we kind of have like the short, ugly ones, and they're also a lot of trouble, which fairies. So I added in these stories that I grew up with, and I kind of just, took a lot of artistic liberty and changed them to be about the main character, the fairy that I'm writing about. And in that book also, I tried to make it very authentic, kind of like the Fairchild Library, but then I was a little hampered by the whole magic thing. And so I was like, I'm just going to make it fantasy, because then I don't have to be so very rigid with how much life they can have and what kind of things they can have. And it's still very much, it's about like 1780s in Norway, which was very different than 1780s in the US. I am really big on history. I used to only read historical romance, and I actually study history. So part of the difference was, in there was a lot less because Norway is really far north. There were a lot of inventions and stuff that didn't come there until much later. So the 1780s in Norway is a bit farther back, probably for the rest of the world. But so I completely forgot where I was going with that.
Oh, that's okay.
But yes, I basically just, tried to add in the things that I liked about Christmas that could still fit in that time period, and the folklore, and then it just kind of just took off, and it went in a really different direction than I had planned. But I like it. I'm very happy with it, and yeah, and I also, again, I had it in for several edits, and it came back different every time, and it didn't come out as a Christmas novella. It came out in July, which is not Christmas for those of us who, count calendars and stuff. But yeah, it turned out really good. The only thing I would say that was really difficult about that book, and that also was the big thing that I wanted to put in with the Norwegian heritage, was that Norway doesn't have a lot of daylight in winter. And lived 21 years in Norway, so I'm aware that there is not very much daylight. But writing a book set in mostly the dark, especially when it's like so far back that they don't have proper lighting even indoors, really difficult. I had to look at moon faces because it couldn't be moonlight all the time, because that wouldn't really work because the book passes over the whole month. It couldn't.
Yeah.
It couldn't constantly be moonlight. There was only sun for like 3 hours in the middle of the day, and then there was like a little bit of light for another 3 hours. And I was just like, can we see his face? Can we see anything? Like, anyone have torches around here? Like, what are we doing now? Like, I have this scene. I want it to be like this. Like, can they realistically see each other when they're standing in this dark hollow in the darkness and there's no stars and there's just snow? Like, how much can we see here? So that's a big thing that I wanted to bring in was like the darkness and the winter. And it turned out to be extremely difficult. And I don't think I would have done it if I'd known how difficult it was going to be. But I also am very happy with how it turned out, but that was really difficult. Yeah. So,
Well, it sounds really
It's always
good.
those
I'm gonna have to
logistical
add
things
that.
that trip us up.
what? I
just said it's always the logistical things that trip us up. Oh, sorry, talked over you again.
No, I think it's a little delayed because like there was a really long break between me talking and you talking, and then you're like, I'm talking over you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was I saying? Oh, I just said it sounds good, and I think I'm gonna add that to my Christmas list of books that I'm reading because that sounds like a good one for that too. Yeah. But Genevieve also had another question, and this is related more on the author side. And she wanted to know best advice to an aspiring author looking to publish next year. And first of all, I have to say, Genevieve, that's super exciting, and we're cheering you on. And yeah, Austin, what would you have to say to that?
So I am also very excited because I don't know that I've seen a snippet, but I have seen her talk about this. So I'm very excited about this. But also, I think if you're planning, like it depends a bit because like some people just want to publish a book because they want to publish a book, which is fine. If you do want to have it more as like a career, I would recommend learning a bit about the business side of things and learning a bit about marketing. Joanna Penn has a lot of really good books on that. So I would recommend that just because it's a really big piece of it, especially if you're planning on publishing soon. You probably want to get a lot of planning. There's just a lot of things, and you want to think a little bit about whether or not you want to, put it in Kindle Unlimited, for instance, which can be really good for first-time authors, just because it's free to take a peek, and people are better at taking a peek when it's free. But then again, some books don't do well in Kindle Unlimited. I just pulled one of mine because nobody is reading it in Kindle Unlimited. But like, want to get it into libraries, or if you, I guess I would probably sit down and like think a little bit about what I want, like what my goals are with this book, and what I want to happen with it, and probably get a good edit. I don't know how far you are in the writing process. Some people finish their book and then they just sit on it and then they're like, oh, I'm going to publish next year. And then some people like me are just like frantically writing until the very end and then trying to squeeze in the edits as we go. But yeah, I guess, just look into the business side and the marketing and think about what you want to do. There's a lot of information out there, and some of it is correct and some of it is not correct. And I think that's unless it's like specifically writing related, because that would be a little different. But I'm kind of assuming maybe if you're planning next year that you're getting to the end of that a bit. Not that I'm anywhere near the end of books that I plan to publish in 2024, but maybe other people are more organized than I am. I'm not. I write very intuitively, and it's hard to rush that. And some people are more, like I know Rachel does a lot of outlining and stuff. I cannot do it, but it really works for her. And like, or I'm assuming because you're getting good books out of it, so I'm assuming it's working. I can't outline things really, and I don't know much about your process, Jenny, but we all had different writing processes, and
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess publishing can look different to a lot of people depending on, how they write. Because like you said, some people, I always want to be those people. They write a book and then they start thinking about publishing it. They're not trying to revise it while they have their editing date booked out and their cover designer booked out and their release date. Because that can be very stressful sometimes, because sometimes when you're revising, things don't go the way you want them to do. And you might have to do an extra revision, and then now you're behind. And so yeah, not that I would know anything about that, but that's where I'm at right now. I'm a little behind because my edit did not go as planned. But I've already got my editor booked in February, so we're just making it work here.
It is. And some people don't necessarily, like they look at it more as a hobby, which is also great. There's nothing wrong in that. It's a great hobby. And then some people are like, I would like to do this forever and just kind of make it my living. And that's a very different approach. And so I usually say to people, booking out for covers and editing is a good idea, because a lot of cover designers and editors are often booked out far. And yeah, getting an edit would be another recommendation. Then again, I'm not sure if you've gotten to that point. But yeah, having a good cover and a good edit and just putting out the best book you can, even if you have to delay things, which I think most of us have done at some point or another. Which I could have published a Yuletide. It's not called that anymore. I changed the title. In my head, it's the Yuletide proposal. It is called a winter proposal. Because it wasn't a Christmas novella. But I could have published it in December, but I wasn't happy with it, and I wanted to be really happy with it. And so I waited, and I had the cover designer change the title on the cover, because I just, I couldn't really publish a Christmas novella in March. I felt like probably would have. It's not overly Christmassy. It's more of a winter book. But yeah, I think, just being really happy with it yourself is also a thing before you publish, because a lot of people are going to have things to say about it. Not all of them are going to like it. Just like we don't like all books. I don't like all books. I don't think anyone likes all books. But yeah, if you're happy with it yourself and you feel confident that this is the best you could put out at this time, at this point in time, that's when you're ready to publish, and you publish it, and then people have lots of things to say about it, and some people love it, and some people really don't like it, and some people just randomly give it 2 stars and say nothing about what or what, and you're just like, I wonder if you read it. I don't know. That seemed like a lot of effort to put into the 2 stars. But then some people give it 1 star for very specific reasons, and I don't really recommend reading reviews, because I think reviews are for the readers and not for the authors. But also I think that if you put it out and you expect everyone to love it, that's it can be a really hard transition. And people read your books and they kind of make them their own because they read them with their own eyes and their own way of looking at everything. And two people might read the exact same book, and then one of them is like, this hero was awful and he was just so forceful and angry, and then the other person will be like, wow, he was so sweet, I loved how protective he was. Like, you're gonna get
Yeah.
different opinions. And I think one thing that I think is difficult is when you're not quite ready for that, and you're not quite realizing that when you publish, this book is everyone else's now. It's yours too, but it's mostly everyone else's. Which seems fair because you get the royalties, right?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, it's got to take what you can get, right? Yeah. Oh, one more thing that I would actually say, if you are looking to publish or looking to write, is to because for me, I know that when I started writing, I was really terrified that someone was going to steal my ideas because they were really good ideas. I don't know how good they were, but I thought they were really good. And I also think that, like with the Fair Shell Library, sorry, I'm jumping over my words here. The Fair Shell Library, I wrote from an idea that someone else also wrote a book from. I am fairly certain that our books are completely different because it really is not in the idea. It is in the way that you write and in the way that you see it. And so what you bring to the world is yourself, with your own experiences, your own ways of seeing things, and your own ways of describing things, your own angles. Nobody else could have written the Fair Shell Library the way I wrote it. Lots of other people could have written a great book on the same premise. Probably even a better book, but nobody else could have written it the way it is now. Just, when you write your book, you are writing it as uniquely as you are. So you're writing yourself into the book, which is why writing is so personal, but it's also kind of the thing you have to bring to the table that nobody else has, is you and your view on things, which I also think is really important to remember. That you have good things to bring to the world.
That's so inspiring. Like, I think I'm getting a little teary right now. Thank you for that, Austin. I feel like that was such great advice for, someone looking to publish. I know really for me, because I'm also going to publish next year too. I don't know about you, Rachel, but I feel like so motivated to write now.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it eventually.
Yeah. No, I agree with the whole you could have the same idea, but it's not going to be the same book as somebody else's. Because, like, I think part of, as you continue writing and you figure out what your niche is, you do kind of watch other authors who are writing the same thing and figure out, okay, what's working, what's not working, what are readers liking, what are readers not liking, if you're going at it from like a business point of view. But then, even though you might be writing a similar genre to an author you're kind of trying to emulate, the thing you're bringing to the story is you and your voice and like the way you present your characters and things. And that's what makes it different. And that's what people will gravitate toward it, is because it's, your voice in it. So I definitely like that piece of advice because I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And oh man, I was going to say something about something you said and I forgot it. Don't know what.
Yeah.
I don't. Sorry, no idea what.
That's okay.
I think that is such a great note to end on, because like I said, I feel so inspired. So I hope that our listeners also feel really inspired by your advice, but also everything you said was so helpful about editing. I hope other people are also now inspired to read more of your books as well, because I know I am. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on and talk with us. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. This was great.
Yeah. feels like hanging out with friends, which is the best part of these interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah, writing is a lonely kind of business, but we got our podcast going. And so it feels a little less lonely now.
And it really, writing a book and publishing a book it's kind of a one-man show, but it's also not, because you have so many people that work in that. You have your editors and your cover designers and your formatters, but then you also have your beta readers and your friends that just, whenever you're like, I should probably stop writing, they're like, no, you should not. You should probably go and take a nap is what you should. And then you go and take a nap. But just, all the people around you. So writing in itself is very solitary, but I think that publishing is really not, because you just have to lean on all of the people.
Yeah. So speaking of friends, Austin, where can we find you? Is Instagram the best place?
I'm mostly on Instagram. I technically have a Facebook page that I every now and then remember that I have to update, and then I post like 5 posts in a row, and then I just leave it sitting for a while again. But yeah, I have a website actually too.
Oh, okay.
So my website is just Austin Ryan. No, it's not. It's authoraustinryan.com, which is quite easy. And then it's also my web editing website, so that's ryanfictionedits.com as well. But yeah, Instagram. I have a Instagram for my author stuff, and then I have another for editing. And they're also author Austin Ryan and Ryan Fiction Edits. And that's
okay. Well, we'll link that. We'll link both your Instagram accounts and your website, so that if listeners want to connect with you on Instagram, maybe they want to hire you as an editor, maybe they want to read your books, we'll leave all that down below, so you can stay in touch with Austin. And and we'll have our podcast links down below if you want to keep updated with the podcast and everything going on. With me and Rachel as well, because we just love connecting with other writers. So you can always chat with us, ask us questions, anything you want. We're all friends here. So, but thank you again, Austin, for coming on, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
Hey everyone, we have a very special discount for all of our wonderful listeners. Austin has generously given us a discount code just for you that you can use to get 20% off of any of Austin's editing services. The code is GoodOnPaper20, and again, you can use it for 20% off when you book any editing service with Austin. So if you are currently looking for editors, go check out Austin's website, ryanfictionedits.com, and get 20% off your purchase with the code GoodOnPaper20.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and tune in next week for another episode. And if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a review so that other people can find us, and we will see you in the future. Bye!